Good morning and welcome to Cheche, the show where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV. I'm your host, Udwa Kamimo. Now, we are a country uncertain of our economic fortunes. The president and his finance chiefs tell us that we're doing just fine. But interest rates, imminent tax hikes, increased government borrowing, and the queries over the handling of last year's Eurobond tell us otherwise. So today's guests, we hope, should offer some more clarity, rather than questions. We have with us the Commission for Revenue Allocation Chairman, Cheche, but he's with us today in his capacity as a former governor of the Central Bank. We also have with us Bill Okero. He's the chair of the Senate Budget and Finance Committee. We have with us as well the regular panel of David Makali and Mutegi Njau. Good morning and welcome to the show. Mr. Cheche, I'll start with you. Given all this turbulence that we find ourselves in, do you have any revenues to allocate?
Yes, we allocate revenues. It's there. I think it's a cash flow hitch, to put it that way.
Cash flow hitch. So are we cash strapped or not? Because we're hearing all sorts of, descriptions.
I think that mismatch between revenues and payments. And I think the biggest problem for national government is this inability to acknowledge there's a problem and to sincerely say, yes, we have a problem, and these are the solutions to the problem. I think there was a bit of denial for a long time. And my reading is that the National Treasury needs to employ more accountants. Seriously. People who will project the revenues, project the payments, and see whether there's a gap in advance. But the story we hear is our debt level is only 50%. We should be all right. When we reach 74, we should worry. That's too simplistic. You can have a debt of 20% of GDP, but if your cash flow cannot repay, or you've got your repayments very punched, you can have a crisis. So the problem is this defense denial is for them to really accept, because we've been there ourselves before. In 1993, this country had a serious turbulence of a different kind. There was too much money in the economy. We had to withdraw the money. Inflation was 100%, but it was acknowledged as a problem. The problem we have now is very serious. Very serious. Why? Because interest rates on treasury bills are these short-term borrowings. It was 8%. It jumped to 21%. The implications is borrowers who are paying, say, 15% in their banks will be required to pay double, 30%.
Apparently they already are being required to.
That is very serious. So, for anybody to downplay, is playing with lives of people.
Okay. You've given us some problems, you've given us some solutions, but let's go systematically. And we'll come to you, sir, in a minute to hear your own definition of the problem. What do you see as a problem? You said denial. You said the Treasury doesn't have enough accountants forecasting and planning for the various scenarios. What else?
Well, as I said, if we were very systematic, first and foremost, why did we hit this turbulence? How come we didn't know? It seems, I'm saying it seems, they didn't have enough accountants to say, these bills are coming due. It can't be that KRA missing 10 billion became a big issue. No. There must have been a lot of payments which somebody was not aware of. And that's why we are this pickpocket of turbulence. The biggest problem now is we cannot sustain this high level of interest rates. What's happening is Kenya is becoming very attractive to put money, even foreign money, because you get 22%, that's a lot of money. So we are going to use a lot of our budget on interest payments, but more importantly, we are going to hurt the private sector. Another issue which Kenyans do not appreciate, something very serious. We have allowed our currency to appreciate. We always say, government, the shilling is depreciating, please save it. We tell Dr. Njoroge, you are a new governor, please do something. Stop the shilling from depreciating. There are consequences in that, because the tool is you have to raise interest rates. Now, you have all heard the currency of South Africa has depreciated. Tanzania, Uganda, these are our trading partners. But Kenyans say we want a strong shilling. We want a strong shilling and low interest rates. You can't have both. Honorable Kero and his team, they are politicians. They have to explain to the public that, look, a weak currency is not in itself bad. We should allow the shilling to be determined by market forces. Do you think the government of Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, why have they allowed their currency to go the way it has gone?
You said something, that it seems that some payments were not factored into.
Not factored.
And would you have an idea what those payments are? And
I have no idea. I'm just over an accountant. When somebody says I have no money.
And should we not know? I mean, from where you sit and from your position as a governor of the central bank then, wouldn't this information be available to the public to appreciate?
The new constitution, Article 201, it says public finances shall be open and transparent. But officials of the Treasury, remember, they are still in the old mode. Everything is secret. Of course we should know. It's our money. Okay. It's not owned by anybody. We should know, it should be open. It should be published. What bills are coming due? How is the revenue? Where is the shortfall? But it's a culture. The Treasury for a long time has been very secretive, and we must give them a bit of time. I think this shock should wake them up.
Okay. Your scenario, how does it affect Nairobi security change? I've seen headline stories, we have lost idiots.
Can we hold that question for a minute and just get Mr. Kero's perspective on what you see as the problem in the market? Because we have at least 4 from Mr. Cheche. Poor forecasting, interest rates, the shilling's strength, and transparency.
I want to add a few more. First, I want to agree with many of the things he has said. I want to start by saying my take on this is that there is a serious leadership problem. That's where it begins. In the Treasury, I think the management of Treasury is weak. And I have said this even in my columns, that that's all these things about cash flows and planning and all those things is about management of that institution, and that's where the trouble is. If you don't appreciate that you have a problem with the people managing that particular office, then we will really be missing the issue. The second is about the policies, the government's own economic policies. And I think one of the key 2 areas where I think there are serious problems with this particular government's policies is, one is on borrowing. There's a trend to borrow and spend. Generally, the feeling that borrowing is it's perfectly okay and it's normal. I mean, the minister repeated it, the last couple of days. He's been insisting that there's nothing wrong with borrowing, and they still want to borrow up to 70%. I think that itself is wrong. To believe that there's nothing wrong with borrowing, that you can. And the world is awash with money. If you want to borrow, you can get trillions of dollars if you want in this country tomorrow. And so that really is a major problem. The third one, I think, is also the determination of the government to try and do so many big projects at the same time, which require huge capital outlay. And you want to do LAPSET, we were told it costs over 2 trillion shillings. You want to do SGR, by the time you take it to Naivasha and Nakuru, it will be over 500 billion plus. You are doing the airport is 100. Every project we are doing is in the 50s and hundreds of billions, and you want to do all of those things at the same time. I think that because every country has to temper its desire for development. I mean, everyone wants to develop. Americans would want to fly half a dozen into the space, but I think everything has to be limited by your ability to manage your finances. And I think, so for me, that those 3, in addition to what he has said, I think is important. But the one I want to emphasize on what he said when you do a budget 2 months ago and you say, these are my revenues, these are my expenditures, 2 months later you express surprise. You're surprised about your expenditure. You're saying, oh, this expenditure is... You're surprised about your revenues because there's no way that you can project that our revenue will be 1.2 trillion unless there have been monthly projections of every type of income by KRA. So it cannot come as a surprise. There's no way you can also be worried about payments because the payment schedules for debt is provided for up to the last date of repayment. He'll tell you. I mean, you don't wake up and say, you know, we had to pay 148 billion the last 3 months, and that's why we ran out of money. I mean, it doesn't. So I think those are some of the challenges.
Okay, so we then come to your question.
The question is, because of this scenario, in the private sector, the people with the Nairobi Security Exchange, shareholders, like me owning my few shares in Kenya Ways or Mumia Sugar, how am I affected?
It's amazing. There's a relationship between money moving away from the stock exchange to the money. It's treasury bills. People tell, I can either invest in shares if I think the economy is going to grow, or this government paper. Government paper is government borrowing. If they are paying 20%, there is no institution that pays dividends of 20% of your capital. So the problem is, it's switched overnight. And of course there's a lot of negativity on the economy. So, as Honorable Kero has said, there is that denial that there is a problem.
Okay, denial said,
right. What he asked about the the former chairman of capital market. But let me add this. You know, from what we have seen, the performance of some of the blue chip companies in terms of their profitability generally has not been very good, and this is what KRA complained about the other day. But what affects, I think, the price also most significantly is when the TB rates, these government securities, are very attractive. Everyone will want to move there, as opposed to the equities. So the price is generally then of the equities, because the demand will be low, will go down. And that's what you're seeing. This is why you find the stock exchange performance of the equities going low, because everyone is going for...
Mr. Carroll, you're a Mandera senator, you're within the governing Jubilee coalition. Dan in Nairobi says the Jubilee government has borrowed more in the last 2 years than in the last 5 years of the Kibaki administration. Corruption has taken on new levels. In a word, I'd describe this government as simply irresponsible. That's one, but there's a counter position from Enoch who says, I think Kenyans have become very cynical. Financing security, devolution, and an exploding population is not a walk in the park. Is the truth somewhere in the middle? Are they both right?
No, I think I mentioned earlier, and I alluded to the fact that we seem to be wanting to do many things at the same time, so that we have an impact. Really, I think that's the... In the past, what I think Kibaki's government focused on significantly was on infrastructure, basically on the you know. In the Jubilee government, I think is infrastructure plus other things like security. For the first time, getting 223 billion. I mean, it's a massive amount of money to modernize security, you know, institutions and so forth, and you know, and all that. True, it's necessary because you find thousands of vehicles now. Every police station has a car. I mean, that helps. You find devolution, of course, was not there, and we have to pump in 259 billion. But I think that said, the issue is really not about wanting to develop. I think the issue is that you have a limited amount of resource, and if you want to borrow additional so that you can also do infrastructure and security and everything you want to do, you must learn to live within the limit, because there is a risk to borrowing, and I think he made it very clear.
I think let me just add what he has said, Edward. The standard gauge railway alone is historic. If the Jubilee government did just that job alone, that's enough. What are they doing? They are doing something called Kalana project to irrigate maize.
Right.
I think 14 billion, or I don't know how much. Frankly, that's a misplaced priority. The farmers in Trans Nzoia and Uasin Gishu, with half of that money or less, they can do a good job. that project of Kalana will come to be a white elephant, for sure. It will be like the Crown Earth project of Tanzania, the British government. Then there is this huge project of increasing energy. Energy, we have got 1,600 megawatts. We want to make it to 5,000 megawatts. So you invest in so much electricity. Do we have people to offset that amount of power?
Not only that, but you want to pump in huge amounts of money on that very expensive sources of energy like geothermal and so forth.
Yeah.
But again, you find the government saying we want to export to Rwanda, you want to export. You know, it's very expensive for you to borrow and develop that, and then all you have to do is to export it again. But I agree with him. You know, I think we have challenges, even in policy. That for me, the economic policy is the issue. There was a time this government, I mean the previous governments, focused on two things. For example, one, in terms of borrowing, they said we want to borrow long-term, domestically, have a 60-40 ratio of domestic borrowing, so that we go for treasury bonds, rather than treasury bills of 30 days, 60, I mean only 80 days and so forth. Now, today as we speak, it's 50-50, external and domestic debt. And in fact, it's going more to external, because we are now collecting more. In the by June next year, probably it will go to 60-40. But the cost of that is in the exchange rates will be affected, and because of the fact that you have to pay and service all those things in foreign currency and so forth. So the other, I think, which again is of concern, there was a time that we said we need to privatize whatever we can get through public-private partnership, or we can do through private entities. We should do so. Like geothermal or energy is one area that you can literally hand over entirely to the private sector. There are a lot of people out there in the world who are ready to. So when you find government pumping in again tens of billions into some of the sectors, we've talked about road concession. Even before we left government, there was a time that we talked of all these roads would be concessioned and so forth. But then suddenly you find we are moving up to creating so many other state corporations and pumping more money into everything that's being done by government. I think there are policy issues. In my view,
my worry, these things you are saying are being done to a lot of Kenyans. They think those mega projects are being done there to skim them off, like Galana project, SGR, the Lamu coal thing. All these big mega projects are not done in a clean way. They are done so that certain people can benefit. Isn't that a serious problem also?
Well, there are intentions and there is operational issues. I think the intentions are, for example, that they want to put up 1 million acres of farm. The idea is to give those people jobs and give get food sufficiency and
what do you mean by operational issues?
Operational is now the second aspect. That is saying that there are people now, when it comes to getting the finance, getting the job done and so forth, and that's where the corruption aspect comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how can that be an operational issue? It's corruption, pure and simple.
No, I'm saying the corruption comes in now at the operational level. You operationalize
implementation.
Okay.
I think
implementation.
Implementation is the word. I think my view is that this government suffers in two folds. From what Mr. Cheche has explained, which is the policy aspect, that the undertaking too many mega projects. Ambition is an aspect of this government which must be put in context. And then the problem is implementing those many huge projects and the consequences. So that even though somebody may say borrowing is not essentially a bad thing, but the dividends of that borrowing are not going to be felt in the long run, if indeed the money comes and is not plowed into the respective projects to generate the economic growth that is expected. So that at the end we'll have spent the money, and much of it is of course being stolen. That is where the problem is. So that even the good projects, even when they would have achieved a certain momentum for the country, will not have that momentum because they were not implemented properly. The Galana one, actually, there has been a lot of questions about it, and I know people in the Ministry of Agriculture and all over who have said that project can't work. But apparently there is a determination not to listen to anybody to have that project go ahead.
David,
so this week somebody was projecting that, look at, for example, the money that has been put there and the harvest that came out of there. Somebody said 10,000 bags for I don't know how much money spent. It means that one bag has cost the country 750,000 shillings to produce. In the analysis somebody was trying to put out. If you look at that, and of course what Mr. Cheche is saying, we would have rolled many times ahead. So my problem is, you who are in government, because you have owned up that you are part of the government, who is government listening to, and can the political wing cause a stoppage to some of these things, including the corruption?
I think I want to answer in two aspects. One is there's a style of leadership, really, that involves, that engages all the stakeholders and all the political players in their leadership, in their decision making, and in their whatever. I think there's a question also regarding on leadership, and I mentioned earlier, really, for me, that's fundamental issue, because the leadership must listen. This question about the denial that he mentioned is about not listening, really. I mean, when you give advice... Mr.
Kerry, you're not the only person to come here and tell us that.
No, let me explain.
Yeah. Is it a coalition? Okay, you answer, but let me just put it in context. Doesn't the coalition meet? Doesn't the coalition execute the coalition's policies? And those policies agreed, and therefore, because when these things happen, the coalition defends those things. Yeah. So how do you defend what you don't support, or what is the point here?
No, I think when you are in government, it doesn't mean that because you belong to a political party, you have to support every little bit of thing that happens or that government executes. If you are not in agreement with the particular policy, you have to say that particular policy is not right. And as a government, let us not do it. But ultimately, the decision making of a government is by the government, by the executive, by the cabinet. It's not by the political. That's why the political class is there to oversee that decision. And how many projects that have been brought by government has been declined? How many appointments have been declined? I think by National Assembly, which has a majority of the party. So it's not automatic. But I think the point second point I wanted to respond to is on the borrowing. You know, if we are borrowing to put into a productive infrastructure, where you can, productive means you generate revenue from that investment. Today we are pumping in hundreds of billions into infrastructure, but our revenue is not growing. Our KRA says actually it's stagnant or it's going down. And that's where the challenge is. So when you justify borrowing, the way Treasury is now trying to justify, and going ahead and borrowing every day, and you don't see returns in terms of more revenues.
But the argument, Mr. Kerry,
it doesn't add up.
Part that growth of those sectors, the productive sectors, and even the World Bank has laid a seal of approval on these investments in the infrastructure, because the payoff is expected to be 5 years down the line. Isn't that an argument that is sustainable?
He will tell you he was there before. So let me tell you. Wait a minute.
We have to take a break, and this needs quite a bit of time, it seems, to understand this 5-year terms that we're talking about, because those also extend to the Eurobond, which was supposed to ensure that we do not find ourselves in this situation. So this is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. Today's guests are the former central bank governor, Cheche, and we have with us Bilo Kero, the chair of the Senate Finance and Budget Committee. Our SMS number is 22422. We'd like to hear from you. What do you think went wrong? Why are we experiencing this turbulence? How should we get out of it? You can also tweet us using the hashtag Cheche.